Today, I'm helping Raphael and Selena navigate one of the most common IRS problems that I see when you file an S-Corp election, but the IRS doesn't process it. Instead, they suspend your returns and then ask you to file a C-Corp return so that you can pay tax on your income a second time. I'm Jasmine DiLucci. I'm a tax attorney, CPA, and enrolled agent, and I do this podcast so I can provide free actual tax help for the guests and provide transparency around the IRS and tax law for you. So, Raphael and Selena have been with multiple accountants who have not resolved their S-Corp election issue, even though it was sent in multiple times, and then the most recent accountant gave them a solution that also included telling them they might have to file for bankruptcy. So today, I'm gonna walk you through how I would approach the situation and then leave you with a template that I have successfully used to resolve this problem with the IRS. Let's dive in. So do you guys want to go ahead and give me an idea of why you're here today?
Sure. So we opened this business in 2019 because her employer was 1099. Mm-hmm. So we were like, well, how do we save? Because there were friends and family saying if you do that through your personal, Social Security would be a nightmare. There's too much taxes and all that. Okay. So we made a CPA that was introduced by, I think it was friends or something like that. They were in the real estate market. And then he's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to set up it's going to be an S-class. We're going to send X, Y, and Z forms, and we're going to do it through paychecks. Okay. All that was new to us at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And years passed by, and then for some reason we couldn't do e-files.
Just to make sure, let's start. So you formed an LLC?
Yes.
Okay. And in what year?
2019. End of 2019. December 10, 2019.
Okay. So they said, let's make it an S-Corp.
Let's make it an S-Corp. Like that, you can save on taxes, and so on and so forth. That's the right way to do it. Yeah. And then we set up paychecks. We set up the whole thing, and that's been like that from the beginning. Right away, mm-hmm. I remember sending in a 2553 to S-Select. Okay. It was right at the beginning of the year, because I know it was December 10th when we set it. We opened the corporation. We got our documents, set it up. Paycheck started at the beginning of the year. Okay. Yeah. So you sent it within that first 2.5 month period, which is great. So that's a timely S-election. And then did you fax it? Did you mail it? We mailed it.
Did you mail it certified mail?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Don't remember that.
That's okay. I was pointing it out. So obviously, if I was in that moment, it would be, to be honest, I'm actually love to do everything, even though the IRS will tell you not to. But as you guys will, as we go through this, we'll see what issues can arise. I would fax and I would certified mail it just to make sure. Yeah. I mean, the IRS will usually be like, they only want one submission. Right. But in my opinion, it's like, well, why don't I have 2 times the chances that you're actually going to open it and actually process it?
All of this was new to us. Yeah. Everything. It was our first business that we opened. Yeah. So we didn't even know we could do all that. Everything was new. So
I didn't even know what a 1099 was before I got that job. So
we were trying to follow everything they were telling us. And years passed. And then I remember they were trying to do Bill, the original person that was there, leaves, right? And for him, he was old school. He was always sending, mailing the tax returns in. We mailed the checks. That's never been an issue back then. Now it is. Yeah. But then he leaves. Somebody else picks up our information, our stuff, in the same firm. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, well, I can't e-file. He's a New York guy. He's like, I want to e-file everything. And I said, okay. So when we do that, he's like, well, they're not accepting. There's a reason for it. And he told us, you're not an S-class.
You had Bill, but Bill's gone.
So retired.
Retired. Okay. And so you're on to the next one. And they said, okay, your S-Corp got rejected. So it's not an S-Corp with the IRS.
Right.
Okay.
And then he's like, okay, that's fine. We just do a late election. Mm-hmm. And then we submitted the same form. He mails it in. As what they say, and then we start. But for some reason, we used to continue mailing these forms in, the tax returns, even though he wanted to do it, filing online. All these years go by. Now the guy that was helping us, he's not there anymore. He's fired.
Okay.
They were not filing the tax returns for a very long time. We kept asking them, like, what's going on? Like, time is passing by and nothing is happening, and they kept kind of giving us this runaround. So let's just get a new CPA. Okay. And do this with someone new because we need to get this submitted.
And the new CPA says, well, I can't e-file. And then that's when the issue started, because I called the IRS, hey, for some reason we can't do e-file. We're an S-class, so on and so forth. And when the verification started, he's like, you guys are not an S-class. Mm-hmm. You're a corp. And I said, okay, well, that's weird. We sent these forms in. Yeah. And they was like, well, there's another issue. We haven't accepted any of your tax returns from the beginning since 2019. I was like, wait, what? Yeah. We paid our taxes. We sent it. Oh, that's fine, but they haven't processed any of them. She's like, well, I can see they're all here. That's what she says on the phone. I don't know if
the
it's
IRS
true.
person.
The IRS. She's like,
no, it's true.
Oh, they do have them actually.
She's like, yeah, I'm looking at them. We just can't process them because we don't have that that 2553 that actually processed?
And I started asking questions like, well, I can't answer those because I was like, well, are we going to have penalties and fees? Like, you have to process all of those as a C-Corp, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Okay. Right now, you're with your current accountant.
Yeah.
And then what was their recommendation?
Yeah, that's
Okay, yeah. So now I told him what the issue was.
Okay.
And he's like, okay, so what we're going to do is that we have to amend all of the corporate returns going back to 2019, all of them. And also your personal ones, because he said you had to do that. But it will be a wash, because he's like, I was doing the math, it will be a wash for all the years. You won't owe any taxes, but there's going to be fees and interest and penalties and so on and so forth that you might have to pay. He was doing some math. He was like, well, for this year, this amount, for that year, next amount, and it's going to be a large amount. What we're going to do is we're going to abate them. And once you abate them, if it doesn't go away, we have to do a Chapter 7. And that's when I was like...
alarm bells.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on.
Just file for bankruptcy,
Red lights,
maybe.
yeah. Red lights. Hold on. Because, like, how is that going to affect us here? I was like, no. I need to find another way around this. There's no way that... I didn't do this on purpose. It's not like I failed to pay the taxes. It's not like I didn't. I was following instructions by someone that I thought was reputable.
Yeah. What was the number of what he thought was going to be the penalties?
Like $20,000 a year, more, give or take.
Okay. All right. So you resubmitted the 2553, so that S-Corp election, you resubmitted it 3 times. You have the timely S-Corp election, but we don't have a copy of it. We know approximately when it was probably submitted. You submitted the late election, so you guys probably know, but for everyone, if you send it within that first 2.5 month period, then you can send it without that extra explanation. And that's why it was so much easier. You just fill in a few things on the form. It's really easy, except if it doesn't get accepted.
Right.
And I know that the IRS actually is pretty good about sending notices to people when they don't accept it. The biggest problem being that there's a massive time delay, right? So it could be 2 years later. It could be it's just a long time. But I do think they probably sent a notice. Well, they definitely didn't send a notice accepting the election, which is what you should have expected. There should have been a notice rejecting or every time that your S-Corp return was mailed in but not processed, there would have been a notice that went out at least one of those times, if not every single year. And then in addition, whoever was e-filing your return would have 100% gotten an e-file rejection, saying that this is not on file as an S-Corp. He probably knew why he was mailing it in I don't know, he knew at some point it probably got rejected. He would have gotten it's not an S-Corp. And that's why for S-Corp elections, we just talked about at the very beginning of this, it's fax it, mail it, keep the proof, and honestly, it's actually the same thing with amended returns. There's just certain things that the IRS processes really, really slowly. Right. And then if there's a problem, obviously there will be a notice, but half the time you've moved, you don't get it. And that's what happened in your situation, right?
We moved it after 10 months, 11 months,
okay,
after living in that first address where everything was registered. We thought we had everything transferred in terms of our address, and we had a year's worth of that mail forwarding, but somehow we did not get that.
It's just something happens there. So that's probably what happened. Maybe it could be as simple as there was a 1 week gap, between the forwarding and then I don't know, you know what I mean? Right. And it's that's all it takes. The notice has gone out, the notice didn't get to you, and it's not going to keep being resent for the same situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You should have told us for sure that it was rejected because of that. Not just because we're a corporation that doesn't qualify for e-filings.
Right, because that's what we were told.
Yeah, that's not correct. Right. There's no corporations that don't qualify for e-filings. It could be a special amended return that maybe you can't do, but not the original filing.
So I can see the problem there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I see this a lot where it's it may just be an experience, where they don't know what to look out for. Because to me, I've seen this enough times to where as soon as it's the 2553, usually a really prudent preparer. I'm not saying most preparers do this, but someone that's being really cautious. Ideally, they're on power of attorney, or it's called an 8821 form. So it's basically the right to receive your information. So ideally, they're getting a copy of everything, and that alone would have solved this problem. Right. Because if your CPA was on power of attorney, you missed the notice, but then the CPA would have gotten the notice. So that's one solution that could have really helped. Someone that's being really prudent would also tell you in advance and say, hey, you have to get this acceptance letter. If we don't get this acceptance letter, that's a problem. They always send an acceptance if it's been accepted. And then obviously people that aren't looking out for that we then tend to view it as, well, then you see it through the e-file rejection. And the IRS, typically that first year you file an S-Corp return, there actually won't necessarily be a rejection. Sometimes it actually goes through. But then it's always the year after that it for sure starts getting rejected, which that's how most people catch it. And that's why it tends to not be a huge deal, because you catch it, even if you catch it 2 years in, we've got on the 2553, you can file a late relief for 3 years and 75 days back. So then you've got that easy late relief. You just resubmit, make sure it's thorough. And that's like the place where we catch most people.
Right.
Not to say there aren't some things that could cause an issue there too. Typically, if you're not complying with being an S-Corp, then it's going to be harder to get that late relief election. The hardest part about your situation is the fact that we're outside that statute of limitations. So we're outside the 3 year and 75 day. I'm assuming that's why your current accountant is saying, let's just amend everything, which I don't think is the right answer. And I'll explain why. With everything with the IRS, there's the what's the technical answer and what's like the practical answer. And we don't want to not do what's technical. At the same time, like we don't want to literally create a massive can of worms.
Right.
Huge issue that I see with his plan is the fact that, I mean, obviously there's penalties, but that's not even what's most concerning to me. What I would be more concerned with is the fact that 2020, because it started back in 2020, right? That's when the S-Corp. So that's outside the statute of limitations, right? Because it was filed in 21. I'm assuming it was timely filed to some extent, right? So then it'd be outside the statute of limitations, which means that we can't get, like he can amend it and ask for the money back. You won't get your refund back.
Right.
So it's not going to net.
Yeah.
Did he mention that?
No.
Okay. So like, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, what he's recommending is let's go report it on a C-Corp and penalize you and amend a return that you can't receive a refund on. So you would actually quite literally double pay the tax and then pay the penalties. And then also before I go into like what I would recommend, I just wanted to mention, because the late election, right? You've submitted it 3 times. We're going to submit it a 4th time.
Hopefully the right way.
So the first thing I would do is resubmit it, but resubmit it totally differently. So I would create a new one. A few concerns I had with the last one you sent in is, first off, it's e-signed, which I double checked, and it's not one of the forms that the IRS actively lets you e-sign. Not to say it's impossible for it to process, but it's probably likely to get rejected just off of that. I also read the paragraph, that paragraph that's written on the front page. You have to put reasonable cause. Now, the IRS is actually pretty darn lenient with it. They let you just say, if because is in the sentence, like they tend to accept it. Like, we didn't file it because our accountant didn't file it, like something, that can literally be circular. I tend to see those accepted. But I didn't see that in yours. So I didn't see any reason like why it was late. That alone is a reason that I'll see them reject the 2553. The social wasn't properly on there. It was like just the last 4 digits. The percentage of ownership wasn't on there. So there were just multiple like things that are incomplete, and maybe that was the problem from the beginning. I don't know how the original one was filled out, but this is obviously, this version that I was looking at is the second one, the most recent one that you sent out, right? So that's, I know we haven't heard back, but we don't want to wait a year to go through. Yeah. So, and then making sure your address on it is someplace where like guaranteed to get the mail. So if there's any chance that you're going to move again, I would just put someone else's address, put a PO box, put your mom's address, like something that's like guaranteed to be permanent. Okay. And then of course you can even add on like a power of attorney or an 8821 with, usually it always has to be someone licensed. So it would have to be like enrolled agent, CPA, or attorney to be on it. And so when we resubmit this is the way I would want you to resubmit it. It's not just the form, right? We kind of want to give more context. We don't want to make it too complex. We don't want too much in there. It's still simple, but originally submitted on X date, then resubmitted on this date. Like we haven't heard from the IRS. We are resubmitting this. And I would do a new form just so that we know that at this point, yes, we want them to accept it as of the original request date, which I think was like January 2020. Right. That would be ideal, but that is outside the statute of limitations. Okay. So either way, we want them to at least go back as far as they're allowed to go back, which is usually that 3 years and 75 days. So that should take us into 2021, like a partial year 2021. So bare minimum, like I wouldn't say, oh, well, go amend those years, because I feel pretty confident if you submit a proper 2553, all of those years can at least be accepted. Okay. And then really the exposure goes down to, well, 2020.
Right.
And sorry, just to complete that thought. So when you're sending in the 2553, we give the explanation, we give a really, really proper form. And then I like to submit proof of everything, proof that you've complied with being an S-Corp, the proof of payroll, you've had reasonable comp, proof that you've timely filed the returns, all of the stuff you've got showing that you really, really do qualify for that late election relief, because those are all the components. Like, what is late election relief? It quite literally is, hey, we've acted as an S-Corp.
Right.
So you want anything that shows you've acted as an S-Corp. And since we don't have a copy of that original submission, if we do have some circumstances to show, like some emails or something, that we could at least, like, we keep the explanation simple, but then we say like Exhibit A, Exhibit B. So you still attach a lot of support in case they want to look at it. It says it was originally mailed. Okay, we don't have a copy of it, but maybe we have an email, like, to anyone and timestamped that reference having already mailed it, right? And so you've got proof throughout. You just make it really simple but substantive, where it's like more pages the better, as long as they could just read one paragraph and be done with it. And then if they feel like looking into more, they could look at all of the support and see that you've really, really complied. So then at that point, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to at least get through like partial year 2021. So I would expect actually 2021, then 2022 and 2023 to then end up processing with the IRS. That leaves us with 2020, which, sure, if you wanted to go like really technical, you could be like, well, I don't even think that would be a C-Corp filing because actually I printed it, right? Your EIN, everyone's familiar, when you file an EIN, it tells you typically what entity you are. Well, you guys reported it was a single member LLC, right? Sole member. And so that defaults to LLC disregarded treatment. Now, I think it's more of a process error that the IRS just has because of things that used to exist. So the process for electing an S-Corp has just changed. There used to be multiple forms. There was an 8832 and then the 2553. Now it's just the 2553. I don't know why this happens, but what happens is when you file that 2553, they don't accept it. For whatever reason, they just default back to a C-Corp. But I think that's because of that prior process that used to exist where you used to do an 8832 and then do a 2553. But since they didn't accept it, at least my position, if I was like arguing with the IRS, which I've never had to argue that because usually we fix it the way I'm recommending, would be, you're a single member LLC.
Right.
Okay.
In which case it's, you could say there's a little bit of difference in the tax. I guess you have the self-employment side, but you've reported all the income. And we're specifically, again, just 2020, that return is closed. It's outside the assessment period. So they can't, they're not supposed to assess more tax. So what I'm going to do is give you access to ask me questions as you get this together. So I'm going to help you with it, but I think you guys seem like you also have access to a lot of the emails and stuff. So I'll kind of guide you on what to put together, and I'll look at the submission before it goes out.
Yes.
And then we'll make sure to keep lots of extra proof. It's going to get faxed. It's going to get mailed. We'll have a copy of what you actually submit with the handwritten signatures, not the e-signatures, with a bunch of support. And I'll actually have an example of one that I've done before and give that to you as well. And those have all gone through. So remember to go to the description to get a copy of the template that I use for when you find out that the IRS hasn't processed your original S-Corp election. And if you would like to apply for my help for free, just like Raphael and Selena did, then click the link below in the description to apply for a chance to be on the podcast. And if you found this episode helpful, be sure to leave a comment, because that is actually how I know what type of content you want me to keep creating, and subscribe for actual tax law from a tax attorney, CPA, and enrolled agent.